The bread and butter of these teams. They were purpose-built for dominance and was achieved by a 24-hour day and night operations. Supported by the infantry, these teams swarmed all over the jungles and the LTT, gradually gaining dominance. The actions of these teams compelled the LTT to commit more cadres and reserves to contest the jungles. This denied the LTT the much-needed reserves and cadres essential to counter other security force moves. From contest to impact, they dominated the jungles and gained moral ascendancy over the LTT. This is something that took time, but we gained it. In the terrain of its own choosing, I emphasize own choosing. The LTT lost the contest for the jungles, and with it, their critical bases, safe havens, and the ability to wage classical guerrilla warfare, which was their greatest strength. Forced out of the jungles into positional defense based on abandoned fortified villages, the LTT was vulnerable to the superior firepower of the government forces. In the contest for the jungle, these teams too suffered heavy casualties, which were replaced by the basic infantry, as the required training and deployment of original teams was time-consuming. If you remember, it was 3.5 months. So the infantrymen from the units kept replacing them. Therefore, an on-the-job training policy was implemented. From impact to success, the success of the special infantry operation teams influenced the basic infantry to adopt the same concept. This is where the transforming effect took place. This small group approach to operations permeated through the entire infantry and soon blended the infantry and the special infantry operation concept and the teams and became the infantry way of war. And as a result of that, the infantry adopting the SIOT concept resulted in the LTT being overwhelmed in an expanding torrent of small group operations, which they could match qualitatively or quantitatively. And with it, the LTT was defeated at their own game in their own background. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now take you through a few lessons learned. It is all about dominance. Operations conducted by the infantry, be it counter-terrorist, counter-guerrilla, or even counter-insurgency, is principally about dominance. And there comes no better way of dominance than through the age-old tactic of patrolling, which is best done by small groups of infantry. A simple infantryman may be adequate. Looking for the perfect infantryman to do the job may not be practical and at times necessary. A major proportion of the LTT cadres, with the exception of a few elite units, had very basic training and relied most of the time on familiarity of terrain and freedom of action rather than actual developed skills. And all that was required was shaping the infantry with a few extras and the confidence to operate in small units. Quantity matters. Yes, it does. Swarms of infantry small groups dominating the jungle could not be matched by the LTT, resulting in them being overwhelmed. Mass formation times of attack on strong points in jungles invariably resulted in heavy casualties and on most occasions failure to retain those captured objectives. The battle-tested doctrine, this concept served as an engine to inspire the infantry who gradually embraced the concept, resulting in the adoption of a battle-tested doctrine without the usual formalities associated with developing them, which you and I know is time-consuming, but here, on the way, we had it embedded in our infantry and accepted as a doctrine. precision in civilian environments. The infantry small group operations were slow and lacked momentum in a conventional sense, as it involved systematic degradation and dominance. But it was effective and achieved fair amount of precision. A big difference from Elam 3 to this, which was important in a civilian heavy environment. Decentralized command was pushed to its limits. Lack of adequate communications to meet the demand of so many teams was a challenge that was persistent and at times could not be met. Some teams were compelled, some teams without communications were compelled to be utilized on missions reduced in time and space. Lack of adequate communications also created the problem of situational awareness and at times resulted in fratricide. We had a few cases of fratricide too. The Claymore mine was the preferred choice of weapon of choice, which was used with deadly effect by both the LTT and the security forces. Innovative methods of employing this weapon was developed by the infantry with advice from the field engineers and the special operations forces who had mastered its use. Training and fighting concurrently. Halfway through the campaign, the special infantry operations teams had suffered almost 50% casualties. But the lesser trained infantrymen replaced them and took up the missions whilst training and fighting. This was the implementation of the on-the-job training policy. The village youth may be the answer. The recruit from the village is more than a match to a guerrilla, terrorist or insurgent. If trained systematically, whilst retaining the natural attributes he inherits from his environment. So we found that we have a person who's as good as the guerrilla, who lives in the same environment, but we bring him in and we conventionalize him and then expect him to fight this in another way, while he just has those natural abilities. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the defeat of the LTT is attributed to a myriad of strategic, operational, and tactical successes. However, the equation on ground was changed in favor of the security forces by the dedication, skill, and will of the infantrymen. An infantryman who blended into not just the environment, but into guerrilla warfare concepts and transformed mind, body, and spirit to defeat the LTT. Thank you.
No doubt that the transformation of infantry to operate in small groups heavily contributed towards defeating the LTT. And also it really improved the skills and the quality of the infantrymen. Now it's the time for us to go for a question and answering session. Anyone wants to clarify on training or logistic supplies? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Ralph about this. I mean, it's such a very interesting and innovative idea. What sort of command and control structure did he have? Because I think at that level, and fighting sort of hand-to-hand combat, how were they supported? What sort of command and control structure was there to help them in the field?
So this